This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, this is the Conservation Commission's meeting for Wednesday, February 19th, 2025. We're calling things to order at 7:11. We have with us tonight Laura Rodriguez, Jackie Kulig, Bob Shabbat, Kathy Demers, excused Nora Jones, and Patty Phillips. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes from January 15th?
So moved.
Okay, Bob, and do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Laura? Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstained? So moved. Okay, we have two folks with us tonight, but I think I'm going to ask them to speak under the agenda item rather than under present to speak. Just going down through our agenda to finance. Carol's not here for a treasurer's report, but I can let us all know that the ARPA funds right now still stand at $1,802.90. And those have to be spent by March 31st, 2026. So I'd like to just keep that in the minutes so that we keep an eye on that. Okay, and Laura's taking minutes tonight, our new secretary. So Laura, if there's something you miss or you need us to repeat, just speak up.
I will.
Under old business property management, Fenton Ruby Park, there have not been any reports by the stewards of any issues or problems at the park. And we were going to talk tonight about the potential timber harvest, particularly on stands 9 and 7. Jackie had gone over some of the information from the field walk, and we came up with a list of questions. And I shot those questions over to Austin. He was kind enough to give us a very detailed response that I sent out to all of you. I hope you've had time to review it. And he's here tonight, so we have an opportunity to talk further about the harvest and any other questions that have come up. Hi, Austin.
Hi everyone, how you doing today?
Good, good.
Good. Do you want me to go over the questions now, or do you want to read them back and the answers or sorts? I'm just not sure exactly how or what you want to go over exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I think we could probably just summarize some of it.
Okay.
I could open up with, just maybe the question, and if you want to summarize your response, and then people can, if there's any other questions they have, we can ask at this time.
Sure.
So we're talking particularly about stand 9. And while we're doing this, let me just share a screen of that area. So here's the Fenton Ruby Park map. And stand 9 is where we have the Wygo Trail in the southern part of the Fenton Ruby Park. I believe the acreage on this is about 60 acres. Is that your recollection, Jackie and Austin? About that?
Yeah, I don't quite remember, but
I got the plan in front of me. I can find it in a minute. If you give me a second.
Sure, sure. And while you're doing that, I just want to bring up a couple other quick maps just to help everybody refresh their memory. So here's the trail map from Fenton Ruby Park, and here's the Wygo Trail that goes through that. And the stand itself is bordered by this right-of-way that goes down to the, trying to remember the landowner's name. Bob, help me out. But anyway.
No.
Peggy DePilka's property.
Focus.
Yeah, thank you. So this is the area that we're talking about as kind of the area of the park that is probably most in need of a timber harvest. And that was also identified by the Conwood plan. Okay, and then I just want to open this map up. This is a little more detailed about the topography. So this area here is the Stand 9 and the Wygo Trail. You can see it in the white, and it shows the topography. So if we have any questions related to any of those issues, we have some maps here. I'm just going to go back to that one. Okay, so Austin, what type and scope of harvest would be best to meet our goals and preserve the aesthetics of the hiking trail that are already established on Stand 9? I know that you and Jackie had talked about some patch cuts rather than a general shelterwood harvest that Conwood had recommended.
That is correct. So walking around with Jackie, according to the town's goals for not only aesthetics, but also a big part into wildlife habitat. And another issue we saw in Stand 9 was there's a very large abundance of mountain laurel for a good section of it, especially as you're getting up and at the top of the hill from the parking lot. Mountain laurel, as I'm sure a lot of you know, is great in moderation, like most things. Too much mountain laurel is going to directly compete and even prohibit any natural regeneration from coming in of the tree species. I've sadly seen forests throughout my time where they cut it and no regeneration really came back, or at least desirable regeneration. Typically, it was shade-tolerant species such as maple and birch more so than your oak and hickory. The oak and hickory require more sunlight as well as bare mineral soil to fully become germinated and get a chance to grow into the canopy. But if you don't knock a lot of that mountain laurel down, you're not giving it much of a chance in the first place. And that's also the second part of the patch cuts, is making a bigger area. I recommended 1 to 2 acres maximum per patch cut, but there is wiggle room with those numbers. It really depends on the town's, on the Conservation Commission and the town's objectives fully. But making those patch cuts will help encourage more than just birch and maple from growing in and try to help some of that oak and hickory to come in, which will also help wildlife habitat by giving another stand age that's going to grow up over time, another cohort of trees per se. That's going to be valuable songbird habitat among other habitats moving forward. And it seems that the forest is fairly even aged, so it's in a desperate need of adding more resilience and younger trees to it. And on top of the patch cuts, I also recommended a minor thinning in between the patch cuts throughout the rest of the stand, not to necessarily implement a shelterwood as Conwood recommended, but more so to remove any directly declining or diseased individuals. Since the property is heavily recreated, mostly on the trails, but I'm sure some folks go off trail, big concern would be the amount of possible deadwood in the future. We definitely want to promote some standing deadwood to an extent, with not, I would say, not too far from the trails, but far enough away it's not a falling hazard. But the last thing I'd want to do is leave a big patch of ash that are going to inevitably decline and die from the emerald ash borer, neonectria infested birch, which we've seen as a big problem throughout. And then just overall competition from trees. Without thinnings periodically, you will get trees that just get outcompeted and eventually need to be removed, or else they suffer mortality and their eventual death and falling over. So I recommended, what me and Jackie came up with was a number of patch cuts, 1 to 2 acres maximum, and then a minor thinning in between the patch cuts as needed, was what we thought was best.
Okay, okay. Jackie, do you want to add to that or any other comments on that?
No, not really. That sounds pretty consistent with what we talked about, and sounds like good recommendations. So
Any questions from other commission members about this particular question that we had? Okay. The next question we had was whether or not you could provide some rough estimate of the volume of timber that would be removed. Part of that was, as you know, from the goals that we sent you, we're not looking to maximize revenue. It's not a priority, but certainly when we start to float, we have to go before the Board of Selectmen, Planning and Zoning Board, Inland Wetlands, because it's a forestry activity. they may be asking some of these questions early on. So we were just wondering, and, you know, you responded that really there wasn't a good way if we were doing patch cuts to estimate the volume of timber. That an estimate perhaps if we were doing a thinning of the entire stand would be possible, but you know, you gave us some good feedback about if we wanted to try to get an understanding of that in the beginning, that we may have to pay for that going forward if the town decided that we could not do the timber harvest. So thank you for that response. Then one of the questions was, where would the landing be?
Hey,
I guess,
Kathy, one thing about so about the estimates for price, I was wondering if you think the town would be happy just to know if it was going to be a profit or a loss. Do you think they really are concerned with amounts, or are they mainly concerned that it's not going to be a cost for the town?
I think that's probably what they would be concerned about, Jackie. Good point.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I think I would guess that it'd be pretty safe to say that it would not be a cost to the town. And we should generate some income for the town. So that should be, a good way to pitch it.
Okay.
Yep,
Since we don't
Jackie,
have actual
Jackie is
estimates.
correct. The timber harvest, unless we were to do any sort of, let's say, timber stand improvement work where we would be doing work without getting any product from, that's a service we would have to charge for. But in this case, it will be a commercial timber harvest. So the town would be paid, and I would be able to present a price to them to say, this is what you're getting paid per 1,000 board feet for your red oak, your black oak, white oak, hickory, every species, so on and so forth down the chain. So much for the firewood per cord. I'd be able to make a breakdown of that, have it written all into the agreement, and have that presented to you folks. It would definitely not be a cost to the town. It would be an income generator.
Okay. Thank you. So basically you put forward an estimate of what the Hull is basically paying the town of Willington to be able to take the timber off the property. Is that kind of how we see it? Because in the past, when we work with a forester for stand 8, he was paid kind of like a commission, and then there was another person that was actually the harvester that bid on the timber. So it was a little different situation.
Yep, that is correct. So you went with a consultant forester in the past, which they normally take a commission based off of the bid, and that's how it goes. There are pros to cons to that. I'm not going to get into that whole spiel tonight because we could go on an hours on the pros and cons of consultant versus procurement and every other aspect of forestry. But essentially, the way it would work with us is I would be able to give an estimate, and then from there I can go out and mark and tally the trees. We'll find out this is what you'd get paid per 1,000 for what species and such as stated. And Whole Forest Products itself would be entering into an agreement with the town of Willington, stating we agree to pay you so much money for so much saw timber and firewood, a number of non-liability clauses, rut restrictions, etc., etc. And then we would put that job out to subcontract with one of our subcontractors. We have about half a dozen crews currently working in our operating area, and we've been using all of them for at least the last 15 or so years, some of them even more. So they're very reputable names, folks we have a long-standing good relationship with that work up to our standard of forestry work in the field. So that's how it would go necessarily that. And I can definitely send over a draft of the agreement as well. And we can discuss, any sort of clauses and have it passed through whoever in the town needs to read it, of course, as needed eventually.
Okay, thanks, Austin. Yeah, because, our role is essentially recommending this. We don't have
Right.
the say, but I mean, usually when we recommend something, if we have good evidence of why we're doing it, it's for forest health, it's for wildlife habitat. We shouldn't have a problem with any of our boards or commissions. Sometimes what we anticipate though is some pushback from people that use the park. There are some people that don't understand the need for this. So education goes a long way before the timber harvest. We found
Sure.
that last time.
Definitely.
One question I had, Austin, is what you pay the town based on the tally at the mill or based on your tally in the woods?
Those are
When
two
the
different
market-
options. We realistically could do either, Jackie. Um, the main difference Jackie was bringing up is a lump sum payment versus a mill tally payment. So a lump sum payment is when I would go into the woods. I would personally mark and measure every tree we're planning to cut from the harvest and get a tally from there. So I would be able to bring that back into the office, use an Excel spreadsheet, and say we're cutting so much saw timber of red oak, so much of black oak, this and that. And while I'm in the field, I would also split up the grades. As you can imagine, a log can be good grade for high quality saw timber or low grade for low quality saw timber. And there's price differences with that. High grade being worth more, low grade being worth less. So I'd get a breakup of that, and from there I'd come up with an average price. So instead of splitting it up on a two-tier basis, I'd do an average price for the red oak and average for the black oak. Mill tally would be where the town's guaranteed to get paid for every board for the saw timber removed from the property, every cord of firewood, but it would be on a two-tier price. So you would be paid a lower value for your low-grade red oak and a better value for your medium grade red oak and a higher value for your high grade red oak. It's essentially how it would work, and it's up to discretion as the scaler at the mill. But that way, the town's guaranteed to get paid for every board foot and every cord rather than an average. But that really comes down to discrepancies and discretion when the logs are being scaled at the mill versus me in the woods.
Mhm. Okay, fair enough. Any other questions about this from anybody?
Were
Okay.
we talking about the landing next, or should I have a question for that now? or-
That's what I was gonna move on to, the landing. So, if you could talk more about where you think the landing might be for stand 9.
Sure. So from our quick walk, my best spot that I saw to make a landing for stand 9 would be right near the parking area itself. Um, exactly where, I'm not sure. I'd have to go and look at it a little further, but there definitely is multiple spots where we could have a log landing near the parking lot area.
Okay.
That's personally what I would recommend, and it seems to be the most accessible and easiest spot without having to do much of any sort of real improvements. The only things I think we might need to do, which would be on Whole Forest Products to provide, would be bringing in some sort of material, bark mulch or stone or whatever else needed to level off and create an excess space where we can properly store the machines and stack the logs and firewood as needed throughout the process. And in turn, the town, if anything, would just be getting more of their part of the parking lot, not in the parking lot exactly, but on the edge of it. Better, well maintained product being brought in, more spots for parking, possibly, depending on what the town wants to do. That's your business, of course, but.
That was kind of to be honest with you, that was one of my major concerns was for this particular stand is where the landing would be because, again, having walked this area lots and lots of times, it's, it gets steep, fairly fast. There is some, areas here that are wet, on both sides here. So I was just trying to imagine where you would put a landing in. You were thinking on the same side of that stand, you weren't thinking opposite the stand?
Say it again, sorry, Kathy.
I'm sorry. So you were thinking somewhere perhaps in this general area near the parking area? And it would be on the same side as the stand? You wouldn't be going across the access road?
That is correct. It would be on the same side as the stand.
Okay, all right. Again, my concern was it goes up. I mean, there's a slope there that comes down to this road, fairly steeply in some sections in particular. So I couldn't quite visualize like how large a landing it would have to be that would accommodate the logs and perhaps some machines. So that was the big one for me.
Would a landing on the other side of Burma Road be an option? Or I guess that would prohibit the access for that private landowner if that was being, because we couldn't really close that off.
Are you talking over here? Where are you talking?
No, I meant just like around Taylor Pond
Oh,
on the main part of Burma Road,
yeah.
just because it would be a little flatter is my thought.
There
I
is,
was also kind of wondering, the parking lot is really the flattest area, and I'm
It
just
is,
wondering if we would have to close a portion of the parking lot or anything like that.
it's really wet when you go from the parking lot and walk into the woods. That it's wet. And if we could somehow get up further on Burma Road, right where the curve is before it straightens out and goes through over the culvert, Kathy. Right, kind of at that crease where the ledges come down, but that other hill kind of swales into that might be a possibility. It's not really high up there, but it is dry.
I mean, it makes sense that perhaps this is gonna take a little bit more detective work, that when Austin has an opportunity perhaps to look at it again, because that's my biggest concern about this is the landing. And it will be very visible to the public, which is going to create more angst. I mean, when we did stand 8, it was down this part of Burma Road, the unmaintained portion. There was no trail in there. That's what I'm wondering is how people are going to react to this. And how do we minimize that reaction by making it, I don't want to say less noticeable, but less in their face when they come and park at the park. And, some of that might also depend on what time of the year we do this. If we're doing the harvest during a time when not as many people use the park, say later fall or the winter, maybe it won't be as big an issue, but if we try to do this during the summer when the park is being used at peak, it will be an issue.
Well, one of the problems, Kathy, if we go further up Burma Road, then you start looking at, I don't exactly know where our property line is up on top. When you walk that trail, it's on that seam of the ledge. And I don't know how much of a break there is at the top of that ledge to get any kind of equipment hauling logs down that way.
I mean, technically, we own this property here where the right of way goes across to the DePilka property.
Yeah.
I mean, technically, we should be able to come in anywhere from this direction. As long as we allow them to continue to have a right of way. I don't know if a landing would be more possible here. So it's out of public view for one thing.
My point is that if I don't know, when you walk on the Weigold Trail, when you get up to the top, if you walk counterclockwise and you get up to the top and you start coming down where the ridge of the ledge is, there's a property owner that's cutting firewood up there for the past 2 or so years. And it seems like it's a pretty tight squeeze between their property and the edge of that ridge line, that ledge. That's my point only.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Well, maybe the best thing to do would be when there's time to take another look at this. When we talk about stand 7, I don't see that as a big issue because there's a lot of opportunities along that part of the road. But this one is going to be, I think, a little trickier with the public.
I agree. I really would.
Yeah, I agree as well, Kathy. I mean, just the fact that there's that main trail going through already tells me that realistically we'd want to, as you stated, have this timber harvest happen at a time where it's the lowest, usual access into the park for folks. Typically, I'm assuming that's winter. That's just my
Yeah.
guess, but I'm sure some folks still use it. But I'm willing to bet a lot more use it spring through fall. So we'd want to have the harvest during winter. And when it comes to the landing, we are flexible as long as there is proper triaxle truck access. There shouldn't be much of an issue. But when it comes to, like, let's say that private drive with the right-of-way road you were discussing over there, it really depends on the condition of that road. If the trucks are able to get up it just fine now, that's great. But if we were to, let's say we required the landing to be on that road, but we needed to bring in 3 loads of stone to make it maneuverable with the truck, that would be something we'd have to take off of the town's budget in terms of what they're getting paid for the timber harvest. We're okay to pay for a little bit when it comes to a load here and there for, you need to just flatten off the landing. But if it comes into any sort of excess improvements and such, we would have to take that off of the income to the town.
That's understandable.
I
Hey,
mean,
Austin, I was just wondering, do you ever have a landing on the opposite side of a road like this? Because the other option is, I forget what the stand is in the southeast corner where we had the previous timber harvest. There was a landing there, which we in stand 8 that we could possibly use, which is just on the other side of that private right of way. But I'm not sure if the machinery would tear up the road too much crossing it constantly. If you think that that private landowner could still get past.
It's possible. It really depends on what the right of way exactly is, if it's just access or if it needs to be clear at all times. But also, my other concern would be the repetitive required crossing over that stream. We try to prevent stream and wetland crossings when we can, but at some point we obviously have to use them. Personally, I think it's better to try to not cross that stream as much as possible, especially knowing that it leads right into the pond. So I would want to have a landing on the western side of the stream and therefore the western side of the access road. That it's possible we very well could do that, Jackie, but it's something we'd have to look into more and discuss further options on.
All right,
So-
sounds good.
maybe the best thing is to, take some time to take another look at where it might be and come up with an idea of, for example, if it had to be where the parking lot actually is, for example, how many parking spaces would we have to give up? Could we time it? Obviously, it's going to be visible, but it would be probably the best for overall health of the wetlands in the area because there's really no wetlands over here. As we get over here, it gets a little wet. We've got the stream crossing here. I think this is one that we're going to have to look at carefully from both a wetlands perspective, but also a public visibility perspective. If that makes sense.
Definitely. Yeah, from what I remember, I believe just past the parking area, but just past the what's the word for it? The little town board there that there's a
Kiosk?
map hung up and such, whatever you call that. Just past there on the right, I believe, is where I was personally thinking of having the landing area, because that's a bigger spot where no one seemed to be parking or wanted to park, at least from what I can remember. We would definitely try to minimize any amount of spots we would need to take if possible. Ideally, I would like to set it up in a style where the machinery would pull in, offload the logs and the firewood, the machinery would leave, the truck would go where the machine was, and that area where the machine and the truck would go are both out of actual traffic. We can definitely ribbon off or put some cones around certain areas just to make sure vehicles don't get too close. But realistically, I'd like to keep the vehicles, unless the truck is coming in to pick up or leaving with the load, I'd like to keep them all out of traffic way, per se.
Any other comments from anyone else on the commission or questions on that particular issue?
We'll figure something out.
Okay. And then the potential timeline, so this is something we could work on and then come next, late fall, next winter would be something that we could roll out. We'd have time to pitch it to Board of Selectmen and other commissions. We'd have time to do that pre-education with the public. Would that make sense?
I think that would make sense. I would just, it really depends on, like you said, the timeline. Realistically, if you wanted it done for next winter, I would want to have it approved by the town and such. Let's see, probably September, October-ish. I'd want to, be able to have a contract signed. I'd want to be able to go through and get the Wetland Commission folks approval, the full Conservation Commission approval, however that's needed and such through it goes. That way there's no room for error in case we do get it early winter. Thankfully, this year has been fantastic. Next year, who knows? And then realistically, when it comes to it, most of the property to be harvested, stand 9 and stand 7, most of it's fairly dry, so I'm not too concerned in terms of operability when it comes to weather conditions. But we definitely don't want to be going through, I would say, in mud season in the spring after 6 inches of snow melts and it's 45 degrees. Could be done. I don't recommend it. But we definitely want to try to play it better with the weather. So realistically, I would want to sign into a 2-year contract, saying that way we at least have 2 winters to try to plan on in case weather doesn't cooperate, even if we have to do stand 9 one way and then stand 7 the next year, or however we want to try to break that up. I think doing a 2-year contract would give better options for everybody. Yeah.
I'd
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. Okay, that sounds very reasonable. And then something just hit me again with the mountain laurel. So when you do the timber harvest, particularly in stand 9, do you also cut the mountain laurel that is there? Or you're just cutting the trees and opening up some areas where potentially new growth can come through, even though the mountain laurel is still there?
Good question, Kathy. So we would cut the mountain laurel that's necessary, and it also comes down to the subcontractor we use and the machinery on site. Certain machineries, such as the full processors and their forwarders, rather than cut a lot of the mountain laurel, sometimes they actually grab onto the piece and uproot them, or they'll fully run them over. Either or will help scarify the soil and help obtain our goal of proper regeneration, especially of the oak and the hickory. But some contractors prefer to put the blade down on their skidder, run through it for an hour back and forth until it's gone before they even start cutting a tree. Some subcontractors will only cut the laurel that's necessary for the patch cut area and the laurel that's in the way of the rest of the harvest, putting trees on the ground and cutting them to length, getting them out with the machines. So really it depends, but we will disturb portions of the laurel, definitely. I don't want to disturb all of it because at the end of the day, it is a valuable resource habitat wise, but we definitely want to knock some of it down at the minimum.
Mm.
Okay. And then in terms of invasive management, as I think you mentioned before, this area does not really have much in the way of invasives compared to the rest of the park. How do we minimize having the invasives kind of move in?
That's another good question. I would definitely recommend that we do stand 9 before stand 7, since stand 7 does have a minor presence of invasives. Last thing I'd want to do is have their machines move from 7 with possibly some of the seed bank on their tires over to 9 and help spread it that way. Sadly, when it comes to getting pockets and patch cuts and that fresh regeneration, when you're drawing in other species such as the songbirds, you're also giving optimal habitat for them to introduce and spread the invasives. Sadly, there's no great way to combat this. At the end of the day, it is the goal we're going for, is to improve wildlife habitat, and that's sadly an aspect of it. The only real treatment I know of invasives that works without much conditions is chemically invasive, would be chemical invasive treatments, spraying with glyphosate or any other chemicals as needed for whatever plants you're spraying on, but then you're coming into obviously a cost for the town. If there is only a minor amount of invasives, best way could either be fire treatment or manually pulling them out of the ground by hand, but that can definitely be an issue. It's a lot of time and effort that goes into that, and thorns.
Mhm. For sure. Okay. Any other questions from folks on those issues? And then you said in your response to us, you were able to do the pre and post harvest education. There would be no charge, no additional charge for that. That would be part of the contract. Is that?
That is correct. And if possible, I would also like to try to advertise that through our company and our social media and such, if that would be all right with the town, just to get some further outreach, and possibly just more than folks from the town of Willington hoping to attend this.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Okay. And I'm just looking at the last question, stand 7. Can you talk a little bit about where you would foresee perhaps a landing being for that particular stand?
Yeah, definitely. So I don't remember the exact extent of the crossing of that stream going over Burma Road, or if Burma Road ends at the stream, exactly where that is. I don't remember how deep that culvert was. I believe it was a culvert. Typically, we would bring trucks in over a crossing, and depending on how deep it is and the material overwards, we would put down temporary timber bridge mats over the crossing itself to help disperse the machine and the truck weight going over. We would build a bit of a ramp with either bark mulch or from our sawmill, or other stone or such material, and then remove the mats afterwards and grade it flat as it was. But I would recommend having a landing at the intersection that you, Troy, and I met at, Kathy, for our initial walk. I don't remember exactly where that is. It's somewhere over from that stream. But I would recommend having the landing there. It seems to be, to what I could see at least, it seems to be a bit of a better middle point. Easy access going in. It's already big, so we won't have to clear much of an area. We'll just have to break down a lot of the brush that's growing in on it. From there, we have access up the road that continues to the west, east from there. We would just have to look at that and possibly apply improvements as needed, as well as get wetland commission. I believe there are a couple wet spots that cross that road. So I'd have to look into that a bit further. But that road intersection seemed to be a good central point to really start that landing area. Flat, level, already big enough to be what needs to be done. Doesn't seem like any real improvement needs to be made.
Okay. Any other questions on stand 7? And were we talking about a thinning there mostly, not really patch cuts, or some patch cuts?
That seemed to be more along the lines of a plus or minus 30% volume removal between the saw timber and the firewood. So it really depends on the tree species in certain areas. We'd want to promote, from at least the objectives I can figure out, we want to promote mostly the oak, the hickory, the white pine, as well as sugar maple. Still remove the declining and diseased individuals as needed. But possibly add in some patch cuts here and there, maybe not necessarily for a wildlife aspect, but again, trying to encourage some more of that regeneration, or if there's a pocket of abundant advanced regeneration, try to release that successfully. So there definitely is room there for thinning and possibly patch cuts. It would be a minor thinning.
Okay. All right, so you think that the volume of wood would be much less there than on 9 in general?
I would assume so, but it really depends. Stand 9, I did find the acreage. Stand 9 is 60 acres, and stand 7, I believe, is 74 acres.
Yeah.
So that little bit of acreage difference might make them a bit closer, but that's at least my assumption.
Okay.
And knowing that there's that bit of a wet feature through stand 7 too, that also loses a bit of the acreage that we would harvest, obviously, from that wet feature, but also the buffer zones needed around them.
Hmm. And, just again, this is the trail map that shows like going through there, and it does cross over into, Ashford. There is a vernal pool in this particular area. Jackie and I documented several years ago. So, there would be
Oh,
some
cool.
some areas that we want to, be sure to protect.
Definitely.
Any other questions from folks? Okay, so what do you want to do for next steps? Do we want to get a little firmer understanding of where the landings might be? Because as we move this forward through the other, the Board of Selectmen commissions, they may want a better understanding of how it's going to be executed, like particularly where those kinds of things would be. I know that we're not, it's not like the commitment you have to make when you go to inland wetlands and you're showing them the whole timber harvest map with all of the skid trails and so on, but I wonder if we should at least identify that and whether it's plausible to do this without having a real big effect in terms of any wetlands or public perception in this particular area.
Yeah, maybe Austin, next time you're driving through this way, you could just take a look and give us your thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. And if you want, if it's all right with you folks, I can also put out some colored flagging. So if any of you want to go take a look at it afterwards, if I'm not there or I'm not able to go take a look, you can swing by on your own accord. I can just tell Kathy what color flagging it is and roughly where it is. You folks can find it and get a better perception for it that way, if that's all right with you.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, if you could flag the potential corners, what you would identify as potential corners. We're not, we're not going to hold you to it exactly, but
Right.
get a
Definitely.
rough idea, how that fits in with the landscape. That would be awesome.
Sure.
Yeah, one of the things, Kathy, I think we should start moving in this as quickly as possible. A year has 12 months, but we're already getting ready to go into the third month.
Mhm.
So, before we know it, we're going to have quite a few meetings behind us and be ready to get this show on the road.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I just want to make sure that we have answers available
Oh, yeah.
as we, progress through those different committees. Like I said, the first commission we're going to have to go to is the Board of Selectmen, basically, and talk to them about what we're proposing and why we're proposing it, and see if they feel that it's something that can move forward without going to town meeting, or if we're going to have to go to town meeting about it. We didn't have to go to town meeting for the other harvest in the past, but we have a new Board of Selectmen, so.
So are we thinking about making that or deciding on a proposal at the next meeting? I don't know if we have to write a written proposal to the Board of Selectmen or just attend a meeting?
Usually like to put something forward to them in advance, to get it on their agenda with what it is we're proposing so that they, can read ahead of time and be somewhat prepared. So I can put something together, and we can certainly vote on it at our March meeting. And then move it forward to the Board of Selectmen. They would have another meeting at the end of March, so we should be able to do it then. Does that sound
Well,
reasonable?
Yeah, we have a
Sounds
better
good.
idea of the landings by then also.
And as far as the timing, Austin, so the contract would be signed after you do kind of that initial estimate and come up with the contract. You would do that when, like, in the summer?
Sorry, state that again, Kathy.
So if we got approval to move forward and your next step would be to go out, would you be marking trees, or how are you doing your next step?
So the next steps I would do, I can definitely do a rough estimate collection for stand 7 since we stated it's gonna for the most part be a consistent 30% removal. That way I can get the rough data figures and from my observations in the field break down what I think should be cut, 30% of this versus that, or more of the hickory, leave more of the oak. However, it depends in certain spots. So I can definitely get you a rough data estimate for stand 7. I can try to get you one for 9, but as we stated, since we're not quite doing a reliable thinning through 9, it doesn't make much sense for me to try to put 60 acres of data into only 10 acres of patch cuts. And that's if we only do 5 patch cuts at the maximum of 2 acres per patch cut. So it doesn't quite make sense to do it for 9. But I can do it for 7. And then typically we would present that, say, this is what I think should be done. This is what you have in total. From there, as long as that all looks good to the town's needs, we can move forward by me marking the boundary lines relevant for the harvest with pink ribbon, and then I paint and tally the trees to be cut with blue paint. And then from there, we have to discuss whether we want to do a lump sum contract versus a mill tally contract or such, but we can get into those details eventually when they come. But as long as my marking and tally comes up, I say reasonable to my estimates, which is to me roughly a 20% margin, then I would expect to move forward with a timber sale agreement.
Okay. Any other questions, Jackie, from your experience?
No, I think that we've got a good plan, and yeah.
Okay, so I'll put something together before our next meeting, that we can look at and vote on, and then move it forward to the Board of Selectmen. Anticipating that this harvest would likely be done, it'd be 2-year contract, but perhaps starting like late next fall into the winter, something like that. And then if they're agreeable to moving forward and we don't have to go to town meeting, then we can have you start that rough estimate and come up with that, what it potentially be a draft contract.
I would come up with the rough estimate. In the meantime, if you want, I can definitely send over the draft contract so you folks can start to get at least the main elements of that, the boilerplate of it, sent through your channels as needed. And then that way, when the numbers are fully done and I move forward with the tree marking and tallying, we don't have to go through every element of the contract, instead just the price tag and the volume figures. If you want, we can definitely do it that way. I think that would help expedite the process.
Okay, that sounds reasonable. All right. Okay, anything else, anybody, before we let Austin go? All right, Austin, thank you so much for your patience with this process and for answering all of our questions in such detail. So,
No problem at all. Thanks for having me. Any other questions or concerns? Kathy and Jack, you have my contact info, so please feel free to reach out. In the meantime, I will let you know when I can help identify the landing areas next time I'm out that way. I'll let you know roughly where I put them and what color flagging, so you folks can keep a lookout for it.
okay, sounds good.
Perfect. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Okay, you too.
Thanks.
All right. All right, moving forward. Under property management, Knowlton Preserve, I did get a report from the steward. Everything looks good on the trails out there, so that's good. Collaborative organizational news and communication. Just a reminder that the Connecticut Land Conservation Council has its conference on March 22nd out at Wesleyan University. And anybody who's interested in going can register and then be reimbursed by the commission. If you register by Saturday, the fee will be 120 for early registration, 110. And if we register anybody after Saturday, then it would be 125. So not a big change or difference, but if people are thinking about going, you may want to get it in by Saturday. Steve Ozier is now a new director of the Wellington Public Library, and he's here tonight to talk to us about some potential collaboration for the summer reading program. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Kathy, how's it going? Thank you guys for having me again and thinking of the library when it comes to programming. So there's one primary program that I think I had floated by to Nora and Kathy. Just to preface it, the summer reading program that we have, it's called Level Up at Your Library. It's through the Illinois State Library, where the American Library Association is headquartered. So just to quickly read through, the theme itself is, so play is one of the ways we learn to relate to others, to think in new ways, and to foster friendships new and old. Level Up at Your Library is an all ages summer program based around puzzles and games. Whether you're playing with STEM concepts, gamifying your reading logs, learning to play chess, or code video games, this theme reminds us that libraries are not just a space for knowledge, they're a space for fun. So in researching potential programs, one that came up through the Connecticut Library Consortium is a author, performer, musician named Michael Caduto out of Vermont. And he had a program I'm just pulling up right now that is called Hoops, Tops, and Rabbit Sticks, based on Native American games. So just to read a quick synopsis of that program. This is an exciting hour of immersion into the realm of play in the Native American tradition. The opening performance draws from Native stories such as turtle races with bear from the Seneca, the great lacrosse game from the Menominee, and the Gluskabe and Zidzis from the Abenaki. Apologies for the butchering of those names, but they'll chant a story, sing along, and at the end, there'll be a variety of Native American games that he shows people how to play. So it's a participatory program for children and families to explore the importance of games when growing up and how games help to keep us fit and sharpen our minds throughout our lives. So that was one potential option.
Hmm.
And I think the quote I had given Kathy, which I confirmed with Mr. Caduto over the phone, it was, I believe, $400, if I'm correct, for the program plus mileage. However, we did speak over the phone, and there was a hope that if we could find another library within the area that could perform on the same date, he can often kind of cut down on some of the costs to since he's kind of getting a good day out of it by being in multiple places, since it's about a 2.5 to 3 hour drive to get down.
And I know I'm just gonna share my screen again, Steve. I had just put this together. Let me see if I can increase this so people can see it better. These are some other programs that Mr. Caduto is available to do as well. And people can go on his website and click on these in particular programs to see more about them. I wasn't sure the particular program that you had described that how quite to fit that in with conservation. Maybe other people from the commission might have some other thoughts on that, though.
Yeah, and if you're okay, actually, I want to share one alternative because it came up actually in passing that the Connecticut Library Association did an auction of programs, and he actually popped up again as one of the options. And so the Wellington Public Library actually won, one of his programs was normally $400. For $240, we got I think it's, if your screen is still shared, it is called Earth Tales from Around the World. And we're kind of trying to, it's a tight schedule, but we were seeing if he might fit that in or be available for possibly the week of Earth Day and Arbor Day and try and shoot for if he was available. I think he had a busy week going into it, but it was April 26th was a potential day, maybe the 19th, but with it being Easter weekend, we weren't sure how much travel and people would be away. But the Earth Tales one uses traditional stories from throughout the world. They're accompanied by songs, chants, native instruments, and dance. Um, During the presentation, they share native traditions for wise earth stewardship and introduces kind of the concept of the circle of life and the basis for balanced, sustainable existence with the earth. So that one popped up as another potential that we have a year from when we won the auction to use him, but certainly time flies. So we were seeing if he was available within the next couple of months that we could make use of that winning auction.
Mhm, mhm. And that would be a little bit less in terms of the cost overall.
Yeah, yeah, he normally, the cost that was presented in the auction was a value of up to $400 or $500, and just kind of based off of luck and keeping a close eye on it, we were able to win it at auction for $240, so well below the cost.
Would you still have to pay his fee for mileage besides?
No, actually, I would have to double check the contract, but I'm pretty certain he kind of had to give a lump sum value of his program, and I think it didn't include mileage. I think he absorbs that cost as a part of donating his performance to the Connecticut Library Association.
Oh, nice. Okay.
What was the cost again for the hoops, tops, and rabbit sticks?
That one was definitely pricier. It was, I believe, about $561 because it was he charges 50 cents a mile for travel, and then it was a $400 base cost for the program. And I think he was hopeful if we found another program or another library that he could do his performance at. You know, he started off with saying maybe he could split the cost of the mileage, so we'd only have to charge us the, 80 and change for the mileage. So it wasn't a significant cut, but depending on the back and forth, that program though, we are looking to try and get a decision on by the end of the week, but that's not pressure on you guys at all. That's more on our end for planning purposes because he's getting his summer of performances set up. So
And the library right now would have sufficient funds to go for that particular program on its own.
yeah, both programs would be sufficient. And in addition, with that more expensive, the summer reading program, um, we're reaching out to in the past. CT Humanities runs a grant program where they'll cover sometimes up to 75% of the cost of a program. They usually like to help any library that they can, especially smaller rural libraries with smaller budgets like ours for programming purposes. So I have to reach out to them again, and I might touch base with them. They're supposed to be at a conference in 2 months that we're going to for the Connecticut Library Association. So if we're able to sync up and this performance would fit within it, that would certainly be another way that we'd absorb a significant portion of those costs.
Mhm. Any questions from folks on the commission? I mean, my gut feeling on this would be, I would love to see maybe us participate in Earth Day. And maybe, pay for the cost or put some money toward the cost of Earth Tales from around the world. I'm not just kind of sure how Hoops, Tops, and Rabbit Sticks interfaces with Conservation Commission goals. Maybe I'm seeing it too narrowly. The other thing, I don't want to complicate it, but I did mention this to Steve as well when we had talked. There's a woman in Ashford. Her name is Jennifer Sterling Folker. She is the chairperson of the Pollinators Pathway Commission. So Ashford has a conservation commission, but they also have a Pollinators Pathways Commission. And Jennifer has been chairing that for 2 years, and she is very willing and very passionate about the subject. She's very willing to come to the library, our library, and to do a program. She would really, do it for free, but she says people have given her, a stipend to do it. She says on average, it's $100. So I really thought she would be an excellent person to contract with, to have her come to the library. And Steve was open to that idea of doing something on pollinator pathways and habitats. She would talk about, how do we encourage the health of our pollinators with native plantings, avoiding pesticides, reducing lawns, and so on and so forth. And she's very interactive and gives people lots of handouts, seed packages. She's done programs at other places where they've actually raffled off plants, potted plants that people can plant. So she had a lot of wonderful ideas. So I was going to also suggest as far as collaborating with the library, that she would be a person perhaps we can work something out with. But I don't want to take away from, you know, what Steve's trying to do as well with Mr. Caduto, because he sounds like when you read if you read things from his website, he is a very talented person who is written a lot. He's been doing this for many years. He gets glowing appraisals from people who have his programs at their buildings and events. So
How do you spell Jennifer Sterling's last name?
Sterling Folker, it's Sterling Folker.
I did it right. I just was making sure. Okay. I have a question on these. The programs here. Some have a P at the end, and the others have a W. Is that presentation or workshop, or does that mean something else?
If I remember correctly, the P is more hands-on, more interactive. The W is more kind of like, maybe, things that are less hands-on, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, going back to the website, yeah, P, he writes it as engaging performances of storytelling, music, and dance, and
there
W
it is.
is, yeah, participatory workshops in the arts and science.
Okay. All right, so I guess I want to be clear. I'm not sure I'm clear in my head. So is it just that you want, or the library, for us to help financially with these programs, or like we did the story time at Fenton Ruby last time and tied in the park with nature, and like is there something more than financial resources that you would like from the Conservation Commission?
For this particular request, it was more just on that financial side, the collaboration, just offering the space of the library as an opportunity for your programming budget to kind of collaborate together. But certainly would be open if there's a desire to do another story and hike activity or something with the commission. Excuse me, Devlin Naris had actually taken over. We're kind of gradually shifting responsibility. She'll be taking over a lot more programming in the near future, but we would definitely we could work together on having events out in the public, and even things like I was listening in a little bit to the harvest educational process, absolutely, if you need a space to have an open session to educate people on the timber harvesting. We have our community room with a projector. If Austin needed a space and it has a computer set up, he could use our projector and kind of have a more open format for that kind of thing. So it's definitely beyond, the initial ask here is the financial partnership, but the other opportunities are definitely available.
Hmm.
The Jennifer Sterling Folker, would that be more like an adult program?
I think so. It would be more geared to adults, maybe, older children, who are interested in gardening, learning more about pollinators. So really, we're talking about two different things here, but I just wanted to throw that out, that would be another potential program that we could collaborate on. How do people feel about maybe making some kind of a recommendation or voting to provide the library with some funding to help with programming, to have Mr. Caduto come? We certainly have a lot of money left in the budget right now. Although Carol's not here, the last time that she reported, we had 1,180, and I don't anticipate that we're going to have any real big needs between now and the end of June. So,
I mean, it's always a good thing to cooperate within organizations in town. That's what it's all about. And, you know, if we can help with that, I think we should. With the thought of being able to connect it in some ways to what our goals are. I don't want us to get lost insofar as sponsoring programs. That's not what the goal is. That's the only thing that I have. Like I say, cooperations between town organizations, it's essential for the survival of all of us. It really is.
Right. And, you know, we're, besides helping out with, you know, from a financial standpoint, we're also going to help with communication. We have avenues of getting the word out that it's a collaborative program between the library and the Conservation Commission. That's kind of why I thought maybe tying it in, if we could, with Earth Day, that would be a good thing. You know,
Maybe it's one of these things, Kathy, hindsight, for next year, setting ourselves up with the library, right, before the year is squandered, and saying, yes, for next Earth Day, we want to work with you on this program, and see if we can't make that happen. And that way Steve will have a year to make sure that he's got his programming, set for Earth Day. And it saves him some time looking around or, fielding questions from people. Instead of questions, he can tell them, well, this is the program we're having, which makes his life a little bit easier also.
the Earth Day program, do you have to know by tonight, Steve, from us? Or is that?
No, definitely not by tonight. I didn't have a hard answer for him, and he had even stated if it's too tight for his schedule,
Okay.
we could possibly look at a different program and shoot for some time in the fall or another program. And certainly, yeah, there's opportunities to look at other um performances or workshops that he offers and see if those might fit better as well.
Um, what do commission members want to do? What's your pleasure?
I think we should contribute and help Steve with this program that he's planning.
Are you talking about the hoops program or?
Well, I guess so. I mean, that's what we started talking about. Seems like the Earth Day program is more, I don't know, next year, or are we going to try to do both of them? I'm kind of a misunderstanding exactly which one
Oh
we're
yeah.
talking about.
Yeah, no worries. I would definitely not ask you guys to do both. That's definitely a lot of money. I was giving kind of an either or option. The one that's for the potential Earth Day program, if the date works out. Um, that one was more that one that we won, but contractually we have to use the program kind of like a coupon to some degree within a year of the winning date. So we have more time to utilize that for another point in the year. The summer reading one is definitely the one that is a little bit more time sensitive for deciding, but at this point, we are planning to move forward with it. It's just a matter of if we have other opportunities to get grants for that bigger program from CT Humanities, or even if not, the Friends had already approved a fiscal year 24-25 budget that that'll include part of those costs. So there's a couple options. I just didn't want to come in hard and fast with one big program and had this other opportunity.
And certainly if we can work something out with Jennifer, on pollinator pathways, that's kind of more probably it's more of a connected fit, or it seems easier to connect the dots between the Conservation Commission and that type of program for me.
Yeah.
Well, we've already got our feet in the pollinator pathways with the Girl Scouts in the garden at the park already. So,
Right. Right, I mean,
It-
there
it-
may be other, if people want to take a look too on the website, between now and the next meeting, although we don't make a commitment tonight, there might be something else that we can look at that perhaps the library would sponsor later in the year. And we still have time to consider making a donation and collaborating on something else if we find that
Mhm.
one of these topics seems to fit within our goals.
So Steve, could we? I'm trying to think. The hoops tops and rabbit sticks, that's the one that is time sensitive?
At least for booking, but in terms of payment, we haven't even discussed like the payment plans. Most of our performers will cut a check for them closer to the actual date, and they'll either ask for it to be mailed ahead of time, but more often we hand it off to them at the day of the event. Um,
Mhm.
and right now our summer reading kickoff is June 21st. So there's definitely a lot more time on that in terms of making any financial commitment, whether it's a full sponsorship or partial sponsorship or anything to that degree. Um, the Earth Tales one is also one that we technically have a year for. I just definitely had that once we won it, I'm like, oh great, this could, potentially work perfectly for Earth Day.
Mhm.
But knowing that that's probably a little bit closer on the timeline, um, to try and secure a date and make sure he's okay with it. But with that one, we've already paid for it. So it's already kind of locked in at the 240. He's already been made whole and kind of donated his time. So that one isn't, um, it's kind of a win-win in both situations.
All right.
If I were to give a personal opinion, I'd say, you know, I think the Conservation Commission might be better suited if they're trying to adhere to like their mission and education, is if they were interested in the Earth Day program, that's the 240, and then go for the pollinator and give them 100, maybe spread a lower dollar amount across multiple or smaller dollar amounts across multiple engagements that, get us working together versus one big one.
Mhm.
So,
Um,
we could, once you arrange the Earth Tales with Michael Caduto, you could notify us and then,
yeah.
you know, it's already paid for, so like we could make the decision to sponsor, to basically kind of pay you back for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And I know it's a little bit of a I don't want to say convoluted process, but essentially, I made the purchase, and we technically get made whole by the Friends of Wellington Public Library. So in the past, I think when we've worked um, with you guys as well as the Historical Society, they'll cut a check out to the Friends of the library, and then in a sense, the Friends then reimburse us for making that cost or that purchase out of the library's town accounts. So we end up being made whole, but because you would be donating to the Friends, we kind of consider that being you're sponsoring the program. We always make a point of saying to people whenever the Friends cover 100% that, we thank them for all their work. It'd be the same for this, where we would, say, we want to thank the Conservation Commission who, donated money to the Friends to help support this event, kind of deal.
Mhm. Okay.
Plus, I mean, I'm involved as a conservation member in Tolland, and hearing you guys talk about the tree harvest, I know there's definitely a lot of need for informational, and if you have budgeted money that you can use towards printouts or events or anything like that, I know you want to have those monies for that too. So I don't want to, monopolize, but there were just definitely a couple of options there.
Mhm. Okay.
I was even going to share just to not go too off track. I love hiking, love going through trails. I was up in Kennebunkport recently, which obviously they're a very affluent community, but they had I just posted a link in the chat, but they actually made pretty decent signs that they put on their trails in a couple of key spots that educate people on what the forestry management is for that particular spot. So that might be an area where if you got some high quality laminated flyers that you could put in, like the parking lot of the parcel or at certain areas where you get a lot of traffic, it kind of gives you that extra when people are getting there and confused, they can walk up to a sign and say, oh, this is what's happening, and get like a high level explanation and education on the spot, in addition to having those outreach events.
Good suggestion. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so maybe at this point, the best thing to do would, maybe you can inform us when and if you book that Earth Tales program.
Yeah.
And then, I mean, I have a good sense from our discussion today that the commission would be willing to put, money toward it, if not for the whole thing, at least part of it. That would help reimburse, what you put forward, and we could collaborate on getting the word out. Maybe if it worked out, even, having a small table from the Conservation Commission to be there at the same time, get the word out to people about other things that are happening, on a conservation level.
Yeah, absolutely. And also getting in touch with Jennifer about that pollinator event too.
Yeah, I'll make sure that you guys get connected. She was
Yeah.
very enthusiastic about doing it, so. All right, any other ideas from other commission members about some potential things that we can collaborate with the library on? I mean, I like the idea of maybe thinking again about something at Fenton Ruby Park, which would be more outdoors, more activity based.
Yeah, we could even try and set up like a, yeah, story time, and maybe have, I know there's that little park area, the picnic benches could have some outdoor games, and then kind of invite people to be engaged in a hike afterwards, to go through the parcel or do multiple things, like after a story is done, um, have people kind of go around and do stuff. I think actually one of the books that we have kind of has like a Where's Waldo essence to it, so it could have kids then go on the trails and kind of not quite geocache, but maybe, you could have like a quick cheat sheet of like, what can you find on this trail, and have them try and point it out while they're moving around the trail.
Great. Yeah, great idea. Or like some kind of bingo paper.
Yeah.
So you check it off as you see it, or yeah, awesome. Just like you do with the recreation department. I don't know if you were aware of this, had done something last several years around Thanksgiving where they put out these
Turkey.
little flags, different stations along the trail. The kids had to find the turkeys.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And, people would go out and do it on their own time, and then
Yeah.
check off that they had done it. So, yeah. I mean, the more we can get kids outside, the more we can engage them and get them to do hands-on things and not be afraid. I'm afraid that kids are getting a little bit averse, and even adults, to being outside because of some of the things now that people are worried about, mosquitoes, ticks, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, EEE, and yeah.
Yeah, we need to, help people connect again, and, you show them there are ways to keep healthy, stay safe, but still be out and enjoy it, because it's so important for their health.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Well, it sounds like I have my marching orders, and yeah, I'll try and keep you guys in constant communication as to any updates, if that Earth Day date, for the 19th or 26th, or even, somewhere around that line, if that works out, keeping you guys in the loop.
Okay, Steve, that sounds good.
Yeah.
Well, have a good night, everyone, and thanks again, and look forward to seeing you all around.
Yeah, thanks, Steve.
Okay,
Bye.
take care. Okay. How you doing, Laura, with the minutes? Is there anything you need a recap of?
Well, I think I'm taking down some notes. I know I'm missing stuff. So in the end, I'll try to clean it up and then send it to you, and then you can fill in if I've missed stuff or if I've got too much stuff. I think that might be the best thing for this first one,
Well,
because I'm not sure how much of the conversation needs to be recorded. Yeah.
I think just a summary, kind of what the overall gist of what we said was fine, would be fine. Don't feel like you have to put in people's comments unless it's a motion.
Right. Okay. Because yeah, I know I'm probably taking too much, but that's partly for me too, right?
Well, I
I'll-
know the feeling. And I used to do it obviously it helps me to remember what we discussed and, you know, what's kind of coming down the pike when I set up the next agenda, so. Okay, moving on. Parks and Rec Department, has anybody heard anything, whether someone's been hired for Parks and Rec at this point?
Not yet.
Okay, thanks, Bob.
They've made their, I don't know, they're down to 3 or 4.
Okay, potential people. Well, that's good to know that they had people apply. Other potential events in the future that the commission might be interested in partaking. We wrote down the flea market, Willington Day, and the 350th anniversary. Does anybody have any updates about any of those events? No, anything more? Bob, you're on the 350th, right?
I'm sorry, what? I wasn't paying attention.
You're on the 350th anniversary committee, right?
Yes, I am.
Any more updates since we discussed it last month?
No, because we haven't got a Parks and Rec director and he was the chair, so we're waiting for, I've had several conversations with one of the other board members, but everybody's kind of in a holding pattern. One of the things that has been brought up is to have another plaque put on the green, similar to the one from 1926, I believe, or 28, when they did that. Just as another commemoration of Willington's history.
That's good. Okay, thanks. Support for farmland preservation. Jackie, thank you for working on dating the draft a little bit more. I'm gonna pull it up for us. Give me a second here. Get rid of these. Okay. So, Jackie, what I did is the material that you sent out to me and we sent to everybody, I highlighted the additions that you made to the first draft. So this is on the right to farm ordinance. This is the one that basically just reaffirms and restates the state's right to farm law. And Jackie added a link to a model ordinance that was written by, I believe, Lebanon for this one. This was the ordinance here. Let's see. That was, if you clicked on that link I just showed, this is what would pop up. So this was the model right to farm ordinance, and it was from the town of Lebanon. So
Okay.
we're looking basically at, you know, the statement of why the Conservation Commission is committed to fostering sustainable land use, you know, why this particular ordinance would be in alignment with that. It talks about what that ordinance does. It talks about where to go to see a model ordinance. And then it talks about the actual Connecticut general statute that talks about the right to farm law. So that was, Jackie included that as well. I think we discussed that this particular proposal for this right to farm ordinance would not be a difficult sell because it in general doesn't affect anything like tax revenue. And there's lots of towns that have already supported it. So the next one, does anybody have any questions or concerns about this particular proposal?
No.
Okay. The next one Jackie sent was an update on the proposed farm tax exemption ordinances. So she, you know, last time she made note, following surrounding towns have adapted some or all of these revisions. And she lists all those towns. She talks about what the current exemption is. So this one's already in place. The first 100,000 of assessed value for farm machinery, horses and ponies. That's currently in place. It's a state mandate. And the town doesn't have to adopt it because it's already in effect. Connecticut statutes do state that municipalities may provide an additional exemption of $250,000 of assessed value for farm machinery, horses and ponies, on top of that 100,000. And we had talked about this last time about what the commission would recommend. And so Jackie added in recommending that the town provide a tax exemption up to $250,000 of the assessed value. So on top of this 100,000, we're saying that the statute allows up to another 250,000, but we're just adding in another 150,000 to the 100. Potentially, towns could exempt up to 350,000. So that's what we had discussed last time. And then under proposal number 2, farm building exemptions. State statutes allow for municipalities to provide an exemption on farm buildings used exclusively in farming or housing farm employees, up to $500,000 of the assessed value per farm building. And farms must be able to show that they have at least $15,000 in farm sales or expenses to qualify for the exemption. I believe last time when Jackie had brought this proposal forward, this was already included, that we recommending that the town provide a tax exemption on farm buildings up to 500,000. So we essentially said, you know, we're taking the maximum, we're suggesting the maximum that the state statute allows. Jackie went on to include the model ordinances for these exemptions. And one was for the farm machinery and the other for the farm building exemptions. I downloaded those as well. So this is the one for farm machinery. It was written by the town of Mansfield. And so it's a model ordinance that we could use, the town of Wellington could use basically. And we would obviously have to change the maximum amount that's property tax exemption. I believe, you know, we'd have to rewrite this part and put $250,000. So that would be the exemption ordinance model for farm machinery. And then for farm buildings, the town of Mansfield had also written an ordinance. And so the Connecticut Farm Bureau is using this as their model ordinance. And that's where we would, you know, add in see, they've got it written in words rather than in numbers. I'm looking at the total exemption here. Having trouble finding it.
One thing to note is the town of Ashford updated their ordinances just last year to reflect these new changes to the state statute to provide the higher exemptions.
Okay,
So we might be able to get additional model ordinances from them if we needed, but My guess is it just changes the numbers.
Yeah, here it is. I'm sorry. I was trying to look for it. It's hard when it's not in actual numbers, it's written. So that, you can change this basically to whatever you want to. Ashford, did they go up to the maximum on both the machinery?
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay. Do you know, if they had any difficulty getting that through?
I think it went in pretty well. There was apparently one person speaking up against it.
Okay.
So.
So I don't know how much time people had spent looking at these prior to our meeting. If you have any questions, comments, concerns.
One other thing I wanted to note was that I was kind of looking into the history of these statutes, and it looked like the um, the machinery exemption of $100,000, which is what we currently have, that number dates back to the 80s, like early 80s. So it hasn't been updated since the 80s. So just think of the inflation since then, and then the building exemption amount of 100,000, which just got updated. That amount, I believe, was in 2003. It was established. So
For the 500,000 for the building?
no, 100. It was 100,000 in I think 2003 when it was first established, and it was just last year that it got bumped up.
Wow, so it went from 100,000 to 500,000 because of the timeline? Basically, if it was last year to 2024?
Yeah, I think that's when they adopted the 500,000.
Okay, thanks. Good to know. I mean, I guess my questions would be, I think we talked about this before. I think it might be helpful to make a chart up to show each town and to show what level they're exempting at for the machinery and the buildings.
Well, I do have a spreadsheet I made up of the different towns I listed and what exemption they have, just whether they have it or not, whether they've opted in or not. Most towns have not opted for the higher level because that just went into effect last year.
Okay. Gotcha.
One other thing is I did contact Kara Fishman, the assessor, about getting a list of farm businesses that she thinks might qualify for these exemptions. But she said she'd try to get back to me at the end of the month because she's pretty swamped with appeals right now.
Yeah, I imagine so. Okay. Because that's definitely going to be a question as we move this through the different committees and commissions, is going to be, how is this going to affect the tax revenue base? Especially this year, there's a lot of push to try to minimize the mill rate going up. So it'd be very interesting to note how many potential farm businesses would qualify, like how many are making 15,000 in sales or have 15,000 in expenses, and how would it affect things? So when
Yep,
Karen,
so hopefully I'll have that info by the next meeting. I'll follow up with the assessor if I don't hear back from her.
okay, great. Great. And could you put together, I mean, I recognize that towns may not have changed their ordinances because the 500,000 just happened last year, but it would be interesting to note how many are at the max for the machinery.
Yeah, I don't know that I can get that information. I did get the information I have through putting it out through a farmer listserv, so it was just based on the responses I received.
But it shouldn't be, most towns have, if you go to their tax assessor, no, excuse me, their town clerk webpage, their ordinances are usually listed by the town clerk, and you can usually look things up.
And a lot of this, the town websites I went to were very minimal.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
You know, it might, the only reason I'm saying that, Jackie, is it definitely will be a question, believe me, when we go before these commissions. They'll want to know what towns and how much, and, you know, we'll have to justify this the best we can. And the more ammunition we have, the easier it'll be to get people to, you know, vote positively for it.
Mhm.
That's my
Yeah,
experience.
I think it's, you know, because that those updates were so recent for the increased values, it's really just catching up on 20 to 40 years of inflation. It
Mhm.
seems like a lot all of a sudden, but it's, you know, it's really just catching up on what should have probably been increased incrementally.
Right.
So,
You know, it'd be interesting to figure out like how many farm businesses would qualify, because although there are a lot of people that actually have their land in 490 for agriculture, I don't believe for 490 you have to show that you have sales or expenses. It's only for these tax exemptions. Is that your understanding?
yeah, I believe so.
Okay,
That's correct.
yeah. So there might have, people might have open space, you know, they might have hay fields or whatever that they're leasing out, but they're maybe not making that amount of money in sales or expenses, so they can't claim any of these exemptions. Because again, that's going to be the question, particularly from the Board of Finance, is going to be, how is this going to affect the tax base? You know, how much money could the town potentially lose in revenue? I mean, unfortunately, that's, you know, shouldn't be the main focus, but it will be when you go in front of these boards. Because, you know, and also coming up with a way to emphasize the benefits of having farms in town. How does that help the tax base in other ways? You know, we have to be, you know, it may not be so evident, but how do we show that this is the right thing to do and it benefits the town in the long run? And I like that you had added, I believe, I'm gonna go back, under the right to farm ordinance, you added that it's consistent with the POCD. You know, these are really important things to add. And moving forward in the next POCD, you know, we can work on some other ways to showcase agriculture a little bit more in the next POCD so that it gets more attention on support. So this is great. You did a wonderful job with this.
Yeah, so I'll check in with the assessor, and then hopefully we can try to move this forward maybe at the next meeting, once we have a little more information.
Okay.
Mm.
Okay. And, you know, again, the other thing is too, the timing of when to bring this forward to the other boards. Right now, they're in the middle of budget season, and, you know, the Board of Selectmen, the Board of Finance really don't want to do anything until we have a town meeting and vote on our budget. So if we get everything ready to kind of move right forward after that, I think we'll be more successful and have more attention, get their attention. I don't think we're going to have their attention if we try to do this during budget season.
No, no.
Okay, thank you again for all your work on this.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie.
No problem.
All right, town development. Anything, Bob, from planning and zoning?
It's news time in Willington for development.
Oh,
Oh, snooze. Okay.
snooze,
I thought you said news. I'm like, what's
No.
the news?
nothing,
Oh,
nothing.
Nothing,
Lucky,
nothing.
easier for me here.
Quiet on the front. Okay. And have you heard anything from regarding economic development?
There's still, I attended one of their Zoom meetings, and there was a lot of internal back and forth, but I really, they came up with a few suggestions, I guess, and their suggestions get thrown back to the consultant, and the consultant has to massage that into the presentation that he's going to give to the town. It's taking longer than they thought. A lot involved, a lot of thought that has to go into this. And, hopefully the end result will pay off. As I mentioned last time, it'd be nice to have plan of conservation and development, have the development presented in a professional way with some answers, not just kind of so comments.
Yeah. Yeah, something more detailed and specific than
Yeah,
just.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I know that the consultant, what I appreciated about him when I had spoken to him, last year, is he seemed to be able to think out of the box and to think about how natural resources, agriculture, things that would attract people to the area were also things that should be considered when we're thinking of economic development. So that was really enlightening.
Right. Yeah.
Hopefully, the committee will, consider all those things too. Moving on to open space opportunities, Burma Road property. So, I've been in touch with the attorney. Mrs. Pettix has signed the purchase and sales agreement.
Oh, nice.
The title is almost, the title search is almost finished, and the attorney feels that we'll be able to close on the property by the end of February, which is good. Some things we need to think about once we close. We'll want to work on with Public Works to get that old camp out of there. Also, there's some, I don't want to say garbage because that kind of gives a different picture, but on one edge of the property that's along Old Amadon Road, there were some things that people had been throwing there probably for years, old automobile parts, some other kinds of garbage that will want to go in there and probably pull out and make ready so Public Works can take it away. So we might want to think about getting a work party out there sometime maybe in late April, before the bugs come out, and just get some volunteers out there to kind of make a pile so that Public Works can take it when they remove the camp. The other thing, working on signage for the Pettix property, because as you all recall, Mrs. Pettix wanted to have something that basically titled the property in honor of her husband and herself, designating it as a sanctuary, which was part of Fenton Ruby Park. So we need to work on coming up with a draft sign for the signage that we can start to maybe look at getting done before the end of this fiscal year. We could use some of the funds for that.
Hey, Kathy, are we thinking about adding another plaque to the stone and across from the parking lot? Is that what you're thinking?
Well, I think she would like something on the property itself, some kind of signage, and it could be a plaque. It could be more like what we've done out on Mason Road for the different trailheads,
Okay.
something like that.
Okay, no,
not-
just curious.
Yeah, good question. There's something on the rock that talks about the Drobny
Right.
sanctuary.
Yeah.
Again, that's a good, I'm glad you mentioned that. There's other things we'll have to change, obviously. We'll have to change some maps to add on the Pettix property. Our park plan, the Fenton Ruby Park plan, not the forest management, but the park plan, we'll have to incorporate it into that. So those are some tasks that we'll have this year after we close. Historic parcel on Jared Sparks Road. I was able to finally reach the landowner. I had left a voicemail for her a couple months ago. She never called back. I tried again and reached her. She said that she has not spoken to her family yet, and she asked me to reach out to her again in an email or a text, because I had sent her a letter before, and kind of go over again kind of what the Conservation Commission was thinking about in terms of, some ideas of how to work with her and her family to conserve the property. So I'll work on putting something together that I can send by email now to her. So still a work in progress. Any other opportunities on open space that people want to bring up?
Well, just the one thing I touched base with you about, and you were aware of the King's property. The King's family is selling about 200 acres of their property on Jared Sparks Road. I had talked to Charlie King briefly about that, and he asked me, if we'd be interested. And I says, well, we're always interested in open space if we can, come to an understanding with the owners, and with the understanding that we understand that each situation is different. And depending if, especially on a large parcel like that, if we could obtain a state grant to help offset that. And I made mention that it's usually a long process, a couple of years, if maybe dragged out to 3 or maybe 4. He said that he talked to his brother and sister, let them know that the Conservation Commission would be interested in at least having a conversation with the family. So that's where that is right now.
Okay. Do you know if they're looking to put it on the market? Are they already in the process?
It's on the market.
Okay.
It's on the market for $1.2 million.
Okay. And you said there would be some access off of which road?
On Cosgrove Road, is you get onto Cosgrove Road, go down about 500 feet. There's a barway on the right-hand side, which is across an old road, and that's their access. Their property abuts all the properties on Cosgrove Road up to where the Drobny's driveway comes down the hill.
Okay, so it's abutting the Drobny property?
It is on 2 or 3 sides, I believe.
Do you know if it's abutting with any of the Joshua's Trust conservation easement?
I'm not familiar with that mountain and how the land is divided up there.
Okay, all right. Well, if you hear back from them, certainly, feel free to message me and we can work, maybe 2 of us can go and speak to them.
Yeah, Charlie usually stops by once in a while.
Okay, all right. I mean, it's unfortunately, that's so much money. The town would have to come up with, for example, if they couldn't, if they weren't willing to take less, that's like, $600,000 that the town would have to come up with to do a match with, which would be
It's a big ask.
a huge.
It's a real big ask. Yeah.
It's great, yeah.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, maybe there's some other partners out there. We don't know. So.
Yeah, and it's not a bad thing to start the conversation.
Right, absolutely. Okay, thanks, Bob. Wellington Wire article's going to be due March Laura, remind me, did you say that you would be willing to work on
I-
that?
I did, but I think there was an issue with that, wasn't there? Because the Parks and Rec director,
Yep.
the one in charge of it, and we don't have one.
Well,
Right.
they lost their associate director also,
Oh,
and he was the one that was doing the wire.
okay.
So all of that, there's a big void in Parks and Rec right now.
Yeah,
Once we have someone or a time to turn one in, I will definitely, I will do one for us.
okay, well, I appreciate that. And, I was just gonna throw this out. If we start to do something with Jennifer regarding pollinator pathways, I'm wondering if it would be good to try to tie in an article, something on that vein, and connect it with when she's doing the program, if it works out, and I'd be happy to work on that with you if you want. I do have material for that, so,
Yeah, that'd be great.
okay, great. Under communications, I don't have anything to report. Haven't had any letters or any emails from anybody. Open space and natural resource mapping. I had reached out to the professor at UConn and the Natural Resources Department, and he still needs to get back to me regarding when students might be able to take that on as a project with us. So I'm still waiting to hear back. And then under membership, and officers update, just to let you know that in January, the Board of Selectmen did appoint Nora as a regular member and Patty as an alternate member. So they switched places basically, and the Board of Selectmen have
Mhm.
appointed them. We still have the vice chairmanship open for the commission, if anybody's interested in that. And also, I'd like to encourage people to continue to think of potential people that might be interested in joining us as an alternate, or at least coming to some of our meetings. We really need to think about, succession for this group. So anything we can do to drum up some new people, that would be great. Under new business, the only thing I wanted to add, and if people have some other thoughts, please throw them out. But going back to my talk with Jennifer Sterling Folker, as I mentioned, she's the chairperson of the Pollinator Pathway Commission in Ashford. And she had reached out to me because the town of Ashford, the town of Mansfield, are working together with Joshua's Trust to try to engage students from E.O. Smith to be available for helping with different projects, in particular, things like invasive plant pulls. And she wondered if Wellington would like to be part of that little coalition. So I wanted to throw that out to see how members felt about it.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah, it's not bad to be part of a coalition.
Yeah. I mean, it may be potentially a way to, get some more volunteers to help with things at the park when we do work days and such.
Yeah. Yeah.
And also to help, connect the kids to maybe some other projects that are related to conservation and environmental issues. All right. Anybody have any opposition to kind of working with Ashford and Mansfield on that?
No, not at all.
All right. I'll get back to her. Anybody else want to add anything to the agenda tonight? Jackie, do you know if there's going to be anything coming up this year, as you guys have done in the past for farm tours or agriculture, anything happening like even with the market, the farmer's market?
No, nothing in particular. I could mention that the Ashford Farmers Market is doing a business expo coming up on March 16th. So that's, local businesses, mostly Ashford, but some other surrounding towns, most likely, in addition to our regular farm vendors.
Oh,
But yeah, the farm tour, I haven't heard from the folks who participated in a few years. I think maybe some of those farms have transitioned into other stuff. So, yep, no word about that.
Say again what the Ashford Farmers Market, what do they do?
So they're gonna have a business fair. There used to be an Ashford Business Association that was pretty active up until 2020, and they would put on a yearly business expo just for local service providers and other, all types of businesses just to come and advertise their business. So we're doing that at the farmers market because we already have a good group of customers who come, and figure it should bring in more people and just be a good way to let people know what kind of services they can get in the community.
What was the date on that again?
It's March 16th. It's a Sunday, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m.
And where is it, Jackie? Where are you?
It's in Knowlton Hall, which is the library in Ashford.
Thank you. Oh, excellent. Okay. All right. Anything else? Anybody? Going, gone? Okay, next meeting will be March 19th. And I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Hey, Bob, second.
A second.
Was that Laura?
No, that was
It was-
Oh, was it Jackie?
Jackie.
Jackie.
Okay, all in favor, say aye and good night.
Hi. Good night.
Night.
Aye, thank you. Hey, Laura, before you
Yeah.
go, let me just stop recording for a minute.